Thanks for tapping in with Street TV. I'm Alex Alonso, and this is the video that I promised all you guys that have been following the Tory Lanez case. But I'm going to go through the main points of the 80-page motion that was filed by Tory Lanez and his defense team, and go through what I've outlined to be about 13 main points. And we'll see the likelihood of Tory Lanez being granted a new trial. I have all the points outlined here, and we're going to go through them one by one, and then we'll talk about the validity and the likelihood that any of these points will encourage the judge to grant Tory Lanez a new trial. Now, only one point has to move the judge. He doesn't need more than one, but he presented more than enough for the judge to go through. And let's go through each one of these one by one. And let's start off with the first one here, which is their first complaint that they had was that the prosecution decided to add a third charge pretty much at the last minute. The third charge was a negligent discharging of a firearm, and they're arguing that because it was added to the case at such a late time, it is both unfair and harassing to Tory Lanez. So that's the first main point that's outlined in the 80-page motion. And the next main point is regarding the Instagram comment that was posted on a page that Tory Lanez actually responded to. Now, this came up in the trial, and it actually takes up the most pages of the motion. 19 pages of this motion talks about this Instagram post. So let's get into the details of the post real quick. So there was a person that made a comment that said that Kelsey Harris, they're saying Kelsey Harris shot Megan Thee Stallion. And then it shows a comment from Tory Lanez's verified account that said that's not true. So there's three main issues that the defense and Tory Lanez is raising regarding this Instagram comment. The first is that it was introduced late. The third was that the Instagram comment by Tory Lanez was never authenticated. No one proved who did it. And then the third point would be that the cop that testified about the Instagram comment, Detective Everhart, relied on hearsay. He relied on hearsay, and Tory Lanez's defense team is arguing that that's a Sanchez violation. And a Sanchez violation is a case that came up back in 2016 or 2017. And that pretty much changed the whole game on the way police officers can testify in court. They're no longer allowed to just solely rely on hearsay when they're testifying as an expert. And that's the third issue regarding the Instagram post. The next main issue would be improper statements that were made by Megan Thee Stallion. Now, what's interesting about this motion, they bring up two parts of Megan Thee Stallion's testimony, which I think is interesting because there are all these accusations, and some of these accusations are accurate about how often and how many times that Megan Thee Stallion lied while she was testifying on the stand. But what's interesting is that the two parts, there's only two parts of her testimony that come up in this motion, and both the parts really have nothing to do with any parts of her lying. So this is the first part of the of Megan's testimony that comes up in this motion, and it's when she testified what happened in the SUV after the shooting. And she testified that Tory had said, "Don't tell the police," because at this point the police are behind them. They're about to pull them over. And Tory is telling, he's basically saying, "Don't tell, I am on probation. I got caught with a gun." Now that came in through Megan, and the defense is arguing that statement was improper. It was improper because, one, Tory Lanez was not on probation, and two, he was not found guilty of that offense. The next part is the right to counsel. Right to counsel. And what they're arguing in this part of the motion is that Tory Lanez was not able to maintain his original attorney, which was Sean Hawley, because of allegations that she helped facilitate a bribe between Tory Lanez and Kelsey Harris. Now, this came up during testimony when they played, well, it wasn't actually testimony. Well, yeah, it was testimony from Kelsey Harris, where she said that Tory Lanez was offering some favors. He offered her a job. He offered her to get an attorney. And then she testified that Tory said that he had to word things a certain type of way according to what his attorney, Sean Hawley, advised him. So that came up on December 14th in the trial, and Tory Lanez and his defense team are arguing after Kelsey testified. At that point, Sean Hawley had to completely withdraw from being a defense attorney on that case, and that was another violation. The next thing is the DNA evidence. The DNA evidence, there's two issues with the DNA. They are claiming that the prosecution did not disclose the complete DNA evidence until days before trial. And then the second part is that the DNA evidence is inconclusive. And what they mean by the DNA evidence is inconclusive is that the evidence does not clearly prove that Tory Lanez's DNA is on the gun. The DNA expert said that the evidence is inconclusive, and they can't say whether he touched the gun. They can't say if he didn't touch the gun. And they're arguing, the defense is that the DNA should only be introduced if it actually makes an identification, and that saying that he may have touched the gun is inaccurate to the actual results of the DNA. And then the next point is an issue regarding creative expression. Now, creative expression is a new law that went into effect in the state of California. It talks about lyrics and other art forms that defendants should not have these art forms, these artistic expressions used against them in court. And there's three issues regarding creative expression that was brought up in the motion. One was introducing a shirtless photo of Tory Lanez that showed a tattoo of a gun on his chest. And then there was a part where here's the second part, where the second time Megan Thee Stallion's testimony comes up in the motion. And it is when she testified that she was frustrated with seeing some of the stuff that Tory Lanez was doing on the internet, specifically a video that he shot where it shows him chopping up horses. And then the third part regarding creative expression is when there was a point where the prosecution was asking the defense if their client was going to testify, if Tory Lanez was actually going to testify on his behalf. And the defense attorney said he wasn't sure. And then the prosecutor said, well, if he does decide to testify, I'm going to go into some of his rap music if he chooses to testify. So that's the third part of the creative expression rule that the defense team believes that the court violated. And then the last 2 points, points 12 and 13, is regarding Kelsey Harris's testimony. Because when she came to court, she pled the fifth, and she basically didn't answer any questions. They ended up playing her audio. And the defense said that the first issue is that they were never given a transcript of Kelsey Harris's interview with the prosecutors from September 2020. And then the second point was that playing the audio in court did not allow Tory Lanez to cross-examine his accuser. It was just an audio. It was over an hour long. And that came in after Kelsey Harris didn't answer any questions. So let's go over these 13 points and let's see how many of them really give Tory Lanez an opportunity for a retrial. I know a lot of his fans are hoping that he gets a retrial, and he's going to be fighting for his life in court on Monday for that retrial. So let's go through these, and I'm gonna let you know which ones have a good chance, which ones do not have a good chance of granting Tory Lanez a new trial. But on the first point of the prosecution adding that third charge right in the beginning of trial, I believe they added that third charge during jury selection. That's not going to hold much weight because that happens all the time. And as new information is received, you're allowed to add charges, the prosecution that is. And they were actually trying to add another charge after more testimony came in. They wanted to add a bribery charge that the judge said, we're too far into the trial to add that charge. But he did allow the third count of the negligent discharging of a firearm. And that was done actually before opening statements, but it was done during jury selection. So technically, that charge was added during trial, but it was before witnesses. And I don't believe that that's going to move the judge to grant Tory Lanez a retrial. On the Instagram post, there's three aspects of the Instagram post that were brought up. The first part where it was introduced as late evidence, I don't believe that's going to hold much weight because it was an Instagram post or an Instagram comment that Tory Lanez made himself. So it wasn't like he was unaware of it. It wasn't like he didn't know about it. It's his own post. It's his own comment. So I don't think that's going to hold weight. The Instagram post was not authenticated. They had a police officer named Everhart testify that was a verified account. This was a detective or an officer that had testified about social media before. So he knows the ins and outs of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And because it was a verified account that had Tory Lanez's name on it with millions of followers, I don't think that the level of authentication is going to sway the judge to grant a retrial. The last point regarding the Instagram post is it violated Sanchez, basically meaning that the expert, Everhart, he relied on hearsay to testify that Tory Lanez or Tory Lanez's account was responsible for this comment. And the comment was that Kelsey Harris did not shoot Megan Thee Stallion. That came from a verified account from Tory Lanez. And I actually think that the third part of this argument regarding the Instagram post, it being a Sanchez violation, holds a little weight. It holds a little weight. So there may be a glimmer of hope for Tory Lanez getting a retrial, because I do believe that this could be considered a Sanchez violation. I see police officers in gang cases do these Sanchez violations all the time, and a lot of these gang cases get overturned because of a Sanchez violation. But unless there is a hearsay exception to Everhart testifying about the Instagram post, it might not be a Sanchez violation. But this point thus far is the strongest point in the motion that Tory Lanez filed with the court. So let's go to the next. The next one was the improper statement made by Megan Thee Stallion about Tory Lanez saying in the SUV that, please don't tell the police I'm on probation, I got caught with a gun. Well, it turns out that he wasn't on probation, and that gun case was handled through diversion, so that means he has no conviction on the gun case. But that all played out in front of a jury. So the defense is arguing that because Megan made that statement, information about a prior arrest was mentioned in front of a jury, which would be considered unfair and biased towards him. But I don't think that this argument is going to hold up because, one, when Megan testified what Tory said, that was legitimate testimony. She's not relying on hearsay. She's actually testifying what Tory said to her in the car. Whether or not it's true or not is regardless. It's what she recalls Tory Lanez saying to her, that he was on probation and he got caught with a gun. And because of that testimony, his gun case did come up in the trial, and the defense had to show that this was a case that was dismissed and he has no conviction, and they were trying to suggest that Megan may have made this all up. But also Kelsey Harris testified the same. She basically said the same thing. It's in her audio, I believe. I'm not sure if she testified or if it was in the audio, that Tory Lanez was saying, please don't tell, I'm on probation, I got caught with a gun. So that I don't think is going to hold much water because there was an opportunity for the defense to cross-examine the police, and the police actually testified that Tory Lanez got this case dismissed. He doesn't have a conviction. It resulted in diversion. So the jury learned that he has no criminal convictions. But the defense is arguing that after all of that was said and done, the damage was already there. But I don't think that he's going to get a retrial based on those improper statements that they're alleging. They're claiming that they're improper statements that were made by Megan Thee Stallion. But it was just testimony. It's testimony, and it was legitimate testimony. So I don't think there's any that point holds any weight regarding a retrial. The right to counsel. Now, this is a little confusing to me because in the motion, they're claiming that his original attorney, Sean Hawley, withdrew from the case during the trial while witnesses were being presented, specifically on December 14th. She withdrew from the trial, and I believe that she had already previously withdrew from the trial. In the motion, they're claiming she withdrew from the trial after testimony from Kelsey Harris suggesting that there was a bribery that the attorney was advising Tory Lanez on, and then she fully withdrew from the case. I'm confused on the timing of that. It seemed like she wasn't there from the beginning of opening statements. It appeared that she was already gone from the case. So I'm not sure that point really holds much weight either, unfortunately. The DNA evidence. There's so much talk about the DNA evidence. The first issue about them not disclosing the results until days before the trial, I don't think that's going to be a major issue. But the second part is really The second part is what a lot of people are concerned about. And this part of the motion was 17 pages long. This was the second longest part of the motion devoted to this DNA evidence. And basically, they're saying that the DNA evidence is inconclusive. Now, we never got access to the DNA report. In the motion, they are arguing about the quantitative aspects of the DNA. And they're arguing that there were certain aspects that the data did not reach. They didn't reach certain thresholds for the prosecution to make certain claims. So we don't have the report. The report was not an exhibit. It wasn't made public. But one of the things that they said in the motion, that Tory Lanez and his attorney said that when you consider the quantitative data, it is more likely that the defendant's position of no DNA is true. That's on page 56 of the motion. And when I read that, it's more likely. That's not definitive. So basically, everything we heard in court was the same thing. Maybe the DNA is his. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's more likely that it's his. Maybe it's more likely than it's not. We have no idea. Also, the defense had their own DNA expert testify, and that defense expert agreed with most of the prosecution's DNA expert. So they had plenty of opportunity to go through that DNA report and to testify to the contrary of what the prosecution's DNA expert testified. But that never happened. And I don't think that the judge is going to grant any sort of retrial based on the DNA. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people think the DNA was just was faulty. I've heard people say it was faulty. It was flawed. But I don't think it's going to change. I don't think it's enough to grant a new trial, because the defense could have said and did all of this in trial, and they didn't. So we'll move on to the creative expression point of the motion. And the very first part, introducing that photo of Tory Lanez with the gun tattoo, I have to agree with the defense on this one. Those using tattoos, I see this in many gang cases, is a very, I would call it a very shady tactic by prosecutors. When they introduced that photo, they didn't introduce it for using the tattoo. They were introducing it talking about a whole other topic. They were talking about GSR. So they introduced a picture of Tory, a picture of Kelsey, a picture of Jaquan at the police station. The picture of Tory, he didn't have a shirt on. Jaquan was fully clothed, and so was Kelsey Harris. Actually, Kelsey Harris was in some sort of bathing suit attire. But then they reintroduced that photo when EJ was testifying, and they were asking EJ about, does Tory have a gun? I mean, have you ever heard of Tory having a gun, talking about a gun, anything about a gun? And then they showed this picture to EJ, and the prosecutor said, do you see that gun on his chest? So I actually think that was a very shady tactic. So on that part, I think that there might be a glimmer of hope for Tory Lanez on the introduction of that photo being used for that tattoo. The second part of creative expression, when Megan testified, I have to see Tory drop videos chopping up horses. That's legitimate testimony. So I don't see that part of the creative expressive argument holding much weight. And then the last part of it was when the prosecution actually threatened to use Tory Lanez's rap lyrics, videos, music against him if he chose to testify. In the motion, they're arguing that the reason why Tory Lanez didn't testify was because of this threat here, which is on point number 11 here. And I don't really think that holds much water either, because even though there is a new creative expression law that prohibits prosecutors from using certain forms of lyrics and art, but not all. So there has to be a separate hearing to determine which lyrics are admissible and which ones are not, which are artistic expressions are going to be used and which ones are not. And they never got to that point. So because, I mean, the prosecutor has every right to say, hey, I want to use some of his art against him. That's perfectly legal. But they got to have a hearing to determine what they're going to use, what they're not going to use. And they never got to that point because Tory Lanez never testified. So I'm not sure that third part of creative expression holds much weight. But I do think the first part that I have numbered as 9 holds a little weight. There might be a little glimmer of hope for Tory Lanez on that one. And the last part, the last 2 points, is Kelsey Harris's previous statement. The defense did not get a transcript. That ain't holding. That ain't holding any water. And then playing the audio in court did not allow Tory Lanez to cross-examine her because it was just an audio. But unfortunately, they could cross-examine her because every witness is subject to recall. So if the defense attorney didn't like what he heard in that audio that they played in court for over an hour, he could have said, I'm going to recall Kelsey Harris. I'm going to bring her back to the stand because I got some more questions to ask her regarding that statement. And he did not do that. So I do not think that the Kelsey Harris audio is going to, the playing of the Kelsey Harris audio is going to have any impact on him getting a retrial. So let's recap the 2 main points that I think do hold a little bit of weight. That would be possible Sanchez violation when LAPD Detective Everhart testified about that comment that came from Tory Lanez's account, because he doesn't know who left that comment. It could have been anyone in Tory Lanez's circle that posted that comment, and but he actually testified that it's a comment that came from his account, which is true. And they're now saying in the motion that someone else did that comment, a person named Joshua Farias, Farias, and that admitting that into the evidence is improper. But I'm almost certain the judge is going to say, why didn't you have Joshua come to court and testify, regarding that Instagram post once it became introduced as evidence? But I do think it might be a possible Sanchez violation. And then the other glimmer of hope for Tory Lanez is the introduction of the tattoo on his chest, that gun tattoo. I definitely think that was an unfair, that created a bias against him, because they turned that tattoo. And actually, it is the exact tattoo that Tupac has. It is the exact same tattoo that Tupac has on his chest, if you guys remember that tattoo. So of all these points, 13 points, I believe two of them give Tory Lanez a little bit of hope for a retrial. But what's interesting is I did a video where I outlined the 6 strongest points of evidence against Tory Lanez in this trial, the 6 points of evidence that I feel that the jury really focused on to where they came to the guilty verdict. And of those 6 strong pieces of evidence that I outlined, only one of them is challenged in this 80-page motion, and that's Kelsey Harris's audio. The other 5 are not even addressed in this motion. And Interestingly, most of Megan Thee Stallion's testimony is not being challenged except for those 2 points that I mentioned. And both those points aren't, I didn't consider those lies. I did a video and I wrote an article where I outlined 16 lies, inconsistencies, misstatements that Megan Thee Stallion made, and none of those are even dealt with in this motion because they probably are irrelevant, to keep it real. But the defense did file a supplemental motion under seal, so we don't know what else they're challenging. We'll find out in court on Monday morning. Let me know what you think about the motion and all the points that I brought up. Do you think Tory Lanez will get a retrial, or do you think that the motion will be denied and he'll be sentenced accordingly? Let me know what you think. Thanks for tapping in with Street TV.